in a busy compound in the heart of Lagos, where the sounds of honking cars and street vendors filled the air. Two women, Mama Amina and Mama Tunde, lived next to each other. Their houses were side by side, their doors always open to one another, and they were as close as family. Even though they raised their kids differently, they were best friends. Mama Amina was strict. She liked rules and order. She believed that discipline shaped character and had a firm but loving way of handling things. But Mama Tunde was calm and easygoing. She hardly ever got angry, preferring to let things flow naturally. Both women worked hard as traders, spending most of their time at the bustling market, bartering with customers under the scorching sun. This meant their kids, Amina and Tunde, were often left on their own. The two children grew up like brother and sister, their laughter echoing through the compound's narrow alleys. At 14 years old, they were always together, sharing secrets, doing homework, and playing in the compound. Their laughter filled the yard, mingling with the rhythmic clatter of cooking pots and the occasional distant sound of a generator humming in the background. One evening, while eating a steaming plate of jollof rice, Tun told his mom, "Mama, I need a phone. All my classmates have one. I feel left out." Mama Tunde stopped eating, her spoon hovering midair. "A phone, Tund? Don't you think you're too young for that?" "But Mama, it's not just for games. I can use it to study too," Tunde said, looking at her with big hopeful eyes. Mama Tunde sighed, adjusting her wrapper. She wasn't sure if he was ready for a phone, but then she had an idea. "If you come first in your class this term, I'll buy you a phone. But only if you prove you deserve it." Tunde's face lit up like the bright neon lights of Lagos at night. From that day, he worked harder than ever. He spent hours studying under the dim glow of a kerosene lamp, his brows furrowed in concentration. Even Amina noticed. "You're really serious about this phone, aren't you?" she teased one evening as they worked on math together, swatting away a mosquito buzzing near her ear. "I'll show Mama I can do it," Tunde said with a confident smile, determination shining in his eyes. When the term ended, Tunde rushed home with his report card, his heart pounding with excitement. He was smiling so big, it was as if he had just won a trophy. "Mama, look, first position," he said proudly. Mama Tunde was so happy she clapped her hands together, laughing with joy. She hugged him tight and said, "I'm proud of you. I'll keep my promise." And she did. She bought him a shiny new iPhone, its smooth screen gleaming under the fluorescent light. It was better than Tunde had ever imagined. He was so excited that he could hardly sleep that night. The phone quickly became Tunde's favorite thing. He played games, watched cartoons, and explored the internet. Amina often joined him, and they spent hours lying on the cool cement floor, laughing at funny videos and sharing games. One sunny afternoon, while the scent of frying plantains drifted through the compound, Tunde and Amina were playing with the phone in his room. "Let's see what else we can find," Tunde said, scrolling through apps. "Yeah," Amina replied, her eyes sparkling with curiosity as she rested her chin in her hands. The phone seemed to have endless possibilities, a whole new world beyond their small compound. Tunde and Amina's innocent curiosity led them to places they didn't fully understand. Their exploration was about to take a turn they couldn't have predicted. One quiet afternoon, while their mothers were at the market, the usual chatter of the compound replaced by distant voices, Tunde and Amina sat in his room as usual. Tunde was scrolling through his phone, flipping through apps and videos. Amina sat beside him, absently braiding a loose thread from her dress. Suddenly, Tunde stopped. "What's this?" he asked, tapping on an icon he hadn't seen before. The screen was filled with thumbnails of videos that looked different from the usual cartoons and games they enjoyed. Curious, Tunde clicked on one. The video began to play, showing adults acting in ways the kids didn't understand. Amina leaned closer, her face scrunched in confusion. "What are they doing?" she whispered, glancing at Tunde. "I think it's something adults do," Tunde said slowly. "I've heard older boys at school talk about stuff like this." Amina's cheeks turned red. "Should we be watching this? It feels just wrong." "It's just a video," Tunde said, though his voice wavered. "We're not doing anything bad." But both of them felt uneasy. The video ended, but instead of stopping, Tunde clicked on another. The strangeness of the videos fascinated them, even though they didn't fully understand what they were seeing. "Let's not tell anyone about this," Tunde said finally. "It's our secret." Amina hesitated but nodded. A part of her wanted to tell her mother, but she knew how strict Mama Amina was. She didn't want to risk the punishment. After that, things changed. When the mothers went to the market, Tunde and Amina locked themselves in his room to watch more of the strange videos. The laughter that used to fill the compound was replaced with chirped whispers and sneaky glances. Weeks passed, and their secrets started to affect their friendship. They stopped playing outside and doing homework together. Everything now revolved around the videos. One day, Amina broke the silence. "Do you think it's bad that we're watching these videos?" she asked softly, tracing patterns on the dusty windowsill. Tunde looked uncomfortable. "It's just videos, Amina. We're not doing anything wrong." "But what if Mama finds out?" Amina asked, her voice shaking. "She won't," Tunde said firmly. "We just have to keep it a secret." Amina nodded, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Then one day, she said something that shocked Tunde. "What if we try doing what they're doing in the videos?" Tunde froze. "What? No, that's not a good idea, Amina." "Why not?" Amina asked, tilting her head. "If adults do it, maybe we'll understand it better." Tunde shook his head. "I don't think it's right. What if we get caught?" But Amina wouldn't let it go. Her curiosity was stronger than her fear. She kept asking until Tunde finally gave in. The first time they tried, it didn't go well. Amina felt a sharp pain and told Tunde to stop. She ran out of the room, crying. For days, she avoided him, refusing to talk or even look at him. Tunde felt terrible. He didn't know how to make it right. He spent sleepless nights thinking about it, replaying the moment in his head. Finally, at school, he found her and said, "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have agreed." Amina hesitated, her fingers gripping the straps of her school bag, but then nodded. "It's okay. Let's just forget about it." They started talking again, but their friendship wasn't the same. Their conversations felt forced, and the easy laughter they once shared was missing. Then, one day, Amina surprised him. "I think we should try again," she said bluntly, her tone firm. Tunde stared at her, his stomach tightening. "What? No, Amina." This time will be different." Amina interrupted, her eyes unwavering. "Please, Tunde, don't disappoint me." Tunde's heart sank. He didn't want to say yes, But he also didn't want to upset Amina, so he agreed, even though every part of him told him not to. One day after school, Tunde and Amina stayed behind in an empty classroom. The school was quiet. Most of the students and teachers had already gone home. The only sounds came from the occasional birds outside and the creaking of the ceiling fan. Amina looked at Tunde with determination. "Are you sure about this?" Tunde whispered nervously, looking around. "As in, we be quick. No one will know." They snuck into the school toilet, their hearts pounding with fear and excitement. Just as they were about to try what they had seen in the videos, they heard footsteps in the hallway. "Someone's coming," Tunde hissed, grabbing Amina's arm. They panicked and ran out, going in different directions, their backpacks slamming against their backs as they sprinted. It was the school security guard making his usual rounds. Luckily, he didn't see them, but the close call left them shaken and breathless. That evening, when their mothers were still at work, Amina turned to Tunde. "We have to try again." This time at home. Tunde hesitated, his hands fidgeting with the hem of his shirt. "I don't know, Amina. What if someone catches us?" "No one's here," Amina insisted, lowering her voice. "Our moms won't be back for hours." Reluctantly, Tunde agreed. They went into his room and locked the door. But before they could start, the front door opened, and the familiar clinking of keys echoed through the house. "Tunde, are you home?" Mama Tunde called out. Tunde and Amina froze. Their faces went pale as fear gripped them. Mama Tunde's footsteps got closer, and she knocked on the door. "Tunde, why is this door locked?" They scrambled to hide what they were doing, shoving the phone under a pillow. When Mama Tunde came in, her sharp eyes scanned the room. She saw their nervous faces, the way Amina clutched her hands tightly in her lap. "What's going on here?" she asked firmly, crossing her arms. Amina stared at the floor, too scared to speak. Tunde stammered, trying to come up with an excuse. But Mama Tunde wasn't convinced. Her gut told her something was wrong. "Both of you, sit down," she said. "Now tell me the truth." The children exchanged nervous glances. They knew they couldn't lie anymore. Their voices trembling, they told her everything about the videos, their curiosity, and what they had tried to do. Mama Tunde listened in shock. Her heart sank. She felt guilty. How had she not noticed this? Had she been too focused on work? Taking a deep breath, she said, "Stay here. I need to talk to Mama Amina." She went to Amina's house and told her everything, her voice heavy with concern. Mama Amina was stunned. Her face went pale, and her hands trembled as she gripped the edge of the table. "This is all Amina's fault," she said angrily. "She's leading Tunde astray." "No," Mama Tunde said firmly, shaking her head. "It's not just Amina. Both of them are involved. We need to handle this together as mothers." Mama Amina sighed. Her usual strictness softened into worry. "What do we do?" she asked quietly, rubbing her temples. "We need to talk to them," Mama Tunde said, "and we need to get them help. Therapy, counseling, whatever it takes to guide them." The two mothers went back to Tunde's house. They sat the children down and explained why the videos were dangerous and why their actions were wrong. They spoke gently but firmly. They spoke gently but firmly. The children could feel their mother's disappointment, and their shame weighed heavily on them. After that day, everything changed. The air in the compound was different, more cautious, more aware. Mama Amina softened her strict ways. She spent more time with Amina, trying to build trust. Mama Tunde also changed. She started guiding Tunde more, realizing her leniency had left him without proper boundaries. Both families sought professional help. Therapy helped Tunde and Amina understand why their actions were harmful and taught them to make better choices. They slowly learned that curiosity had to be guided by wisdom. But despite the effort to fix things, the bond between the families was never the same. Mama Amina decided to move to another state, hoping to give Amina a fresh start. As the moving truck drove away, Tunde watched from the compound, feeling a mix of sadness and relief. He had learned a hard lesson, one he would never forget. Parents should spend time with their kids, talk to them about safe phone use, and teach them about the dangers of certain content. Phones can be helpful tools, but they should only be given when a child is mature enough to handle them responsibly. This story teaches us the importance of guiding and monitoring children's use of technology. Parents should actively engage with their kids, talk to them about safe online habits, and set clear boundaries to protect them from harmful content. A lack of supervision can lead to unintended consequences that may affect their emotional and psychological well-being. Thank you for watching my channel. Stay tuned for more insightful and engaging stories. Don't forget to check out other exciting videos on the channel. I was only trying to help Aisha try to explain, her voice trembling. I found her in the bush. She was in pain. I didn't know what to do, but the villagers didn't listen. The more Aisha tried to explain, the angrier they got. The story changed and grew with every telling. Some said she had used the woman for a money ritual just to renew her uncle's wealth. Once upon a time, in a small village surrounded by lush green fields and a sparkling river, there lived a young girl named Aisha. She was a very beautiful and clever girl. Her uncle Malam was the wealthiest farmer in the village, loved by everyone for his kind heart. When Malam passed away, Aisha, who was his niece, inherited all his wealth and his big farm. Aisha's parents had died when she was very little, so she was all alone in her big house with its high walls and grand wooden doors. But she was not lonely. She had the whole village as her family. Malam was a man who believed in sharing his blessings. He would give away half of his farm's produce to people who had less. After Malam passed away, Aisha continued doing the same. She was just like her uncle, kind and generous. Every time the farm had a harvest, she made sure the villagers got their share, especially the old men and women who couldn't work anymore. Aisha wasn't just kind by giving away food and her farm produce, she was also kind in small ways like smiling, listening to others, and helping out. Everyone in the village loved Aisha because she was different from other wealthy people. She was humble and down to earth. She didn't act like she was better than anyone else. Instead, she would spend her free time with other girls of the village, chatting and playing like she was one of them. The villagers loved her, not just because she gave them things, but because she was one of them at heart. People would often say, "Look at Aisha. She's just like her uncle Malam, so kind and giving," and Aisha would just smile and continue doing her good work. She believed that if you have the means to help, you should. Little did she know that her grandmother, who lived in a small clay hut at the edge of the village, had some wise words of caution for her words that would soon change the way she saw the world. One sunny day, Aisha went to visit her grandmother. Her grandmother was old and wise, with many stories and lessons from her long life. as they sat under a big tree outside her hut. Her grandmother looked at Aisha with a serious look in her eyes. Aisha, her grandmother, said, "You are just like your uncle, always ready to help. But I must tell you something important." Aisha listened carefully as her grandmother continued. Aisha listened carefully as her grandmother continued. "It's good to be kind, but you must be careful. Not everyone who smiles at you is your friend." Her grandmother then told her an old saying, "People love heroes, but what they love more than heroes is seeing the hero fall." Aisha looked puzzled, so her grandmother explained, "I told the same thing to your Uncle Malam. Being too kind can sometimes bring trouble. Some people might take advantage of your kindness or even become jealous. Aisha thought about this for a moment, but she couldn't imagine anyone in her village being unkind to her. "I understand," Grandma Aisha replied, "but I believe that if I can help, I should. That's what makes our village strong. We help each other." Her grandmother nodded, knowing Aisha was just as stubborn as her uncle. "Just remember, not all help is good help. Sometimes the best help is teaching others to stand on their own." Aisha hugged her grandmother, promising to be careful, but deep down she still believed in her uncle's way to help wherever and whenever she could. Little did Aisha know her grandmother's words would soon echo in her life in a way she never expected. One evening, as Aisha was walking home through a quiet path lined with tall trees and chirping birds, she heard a cry for help coming from the bush. Her heart raced as she followed the sound and found a woman lying on the ground in pain. The woman was pregnant and it looked like her baby was coming soon. Without a second thought, Aisha rushed to help. She remembered watching the village midwives and tried to do what they did, but things were not going well. The woman was losing a lot of blood, and Aisha didn't know how to stop it. She was scared, but kept trying to help, hoping she could save both the mother and her baby. As the sun began to set, casting an orange glow over the village, the woman's cries grew weaker, so Aisha decided to take her to the village. As Aisha tried to help the woman to the midwife's house, just as they stepped into the village in front of everybody in the village square, the woman suddenly collapsed. Aisha shouted for help, but by the time others came, the woman was not moving. Aisha felt her heart sink as the woman stopped moving. She was covered in blood, her hands shaking. She didn't know what to do. She had tried to help, but now the woman lay cold on the ground, looking like she was dead. Aisha was in shock. She had wanted to be a hero to save the day like her uncle always did, but now she stood alone in the middle of the village with her hands covered in blood and the pregnant woman not moving. The villagers, in shock and fear, started whispering. "She's dead," someone said. "Aisha killed her," one person whispered. That Aisha had hurt the woman, another said she was a witch. The word spread like wildfire. "Aisha is a witch," they said. "She brought bad luck upon the woman." Aisha couldn't believe her ears. These were the same people she had grown up with, helped and cared for. How could they think so ill of her? The villagers who had been benefactors from Aisha's uncle's farm now looked at her like she was a stranger. All of a sudden, the once generous Aisha had become dangerous in their faces. "I was only trying to help," Aisha tried to explain, her voice trembling. "I found her in the bush. She was in pain. I didn't know what to do." But the villagers didn't listen. The more Aisha tried to explain, the angrier they got. The story changed and grew with every telling. Some said she had used the woman for a money ritual just to renew her uncle's wealth. Others said she was cursed, since no woman had died in childbirth in the village since Aisha's own birth. Aisha stood in the middle of the crowd, feeling alone and scared. She had always seen the best in her village, but now she saw something else, fear and suspicion. It was like a dark cloud had covered the sun, and the warmth she had always felt in her village was gone. She remembered her grandmother's warning and wished she had listened. As the accusations grew, the villagers decided to take Aisha to the king for judgment. Aisha walked with her head down, her heart heavy with sadness and disbelief. The kind girl who had always been a hero in the village was now being treated like a villain. This was a betrayal she never saw coming. The angry villagers dragged Aisha to the king's palace. The king, an old man with a kind face, had known Aisha since she was a child. He had seen her grow up into a kind and generous young woman. But now, as the villagers told their stories, his face grew serious. His face grew serious. The villagers spoke loudly, their words filled with fear and anger. "She killed the woman," one said. "She's a witch," another added. The king listened, his eyes moving from the villagers to Aisha. She stood there, her clothes still stained with blood, looking small and scared. The king knew Aisha's heart and knew she was good and kind, but the villagers were scared, and their fear was turning into anger. The king thought about what was best for the village. He had to keep peace even if it meant making a hard choice. "Aisha," the king said, his voice heavy, "you are accused of a great crime. The tradition of our land says that anyone who takes a life must face punishment. He or she will be prosecuted." Aisha's heart sank. She looked into the king's eyes, hoping he would see the truth. But the king looked away. "I didn't do it," Aisha whispered, but her voice was lost in the shouts of the crowd. She felt alone, surrounded by the angry faces of people she once called friends and family. She remembered her grandmother's words, "People love heroes, but what they love more than heroes is seeing the hero fall." It was all happening just as her grandmother had warned. Her world was crashing down, and there was nothing she could do. She never understood those words until now. The same people she had helped were now calling for her punishment. The king ordered Aisha to be held until her fate could be decided. She was led away, her head down, her heart broken. The kindness she had always believed in had turned against her. In the eyes of her village, she was no longer a hero, but a villain. This was a lesson Aisha would never forget. She sat in the small dark cell at the back of the palace, hearing the muffled cries and whispers of the villagers outside. But just as all hope seemed lost, an unexpected voice came to her rescue. As the villagers were about to take Aisha away, the midwife hurried into the palace out of breath. "Stop," she cried. "The woman is alive. She just fainted because she lost a lot of blood." A hush fell over the crowd. The midwife explained that the woman had given birth to a healthy baby and was resting in her house. After the truth came out, the villagers looked at each other, shame written on their faces. They had been so quick to accuse Aisha, the same girl who had always been there for them. One by one, they apologized for their hasty judgments and harsh words. "We were wrong," they said. "Please forgive us." Aisha listened quietly, her eyes reflecting a mix of forgiveness and deep thought, but she never said a word. That day she just walked away from the crowd, her steps slow but steady. Then one evening, the villagers gathered around Aisha as they used to, but this time it was different. Aisha stood before them, a calm and wise look on her face. "I forgive you all," she began, her voice gentle yet firm. "But we must learn from this. Being kind is good, but we must also be wise. Aisha spoke about the importance of balance in helping others. Kindness is like a river that should flow but with caution. She said, we should help but also think about how and when we help. It's not just about giving what we can, it's also about understanding what's truly needed. That day, if I had run to the village to call the midwives instead of trying to help all by myself, the situation might have been different. The villagers listened, their faces showing understanding and respect. Aisha talked about setting limits to kindness. We can't pour from an empty cup, she explained. As we care for others, we must care for others. We must care for ourselves too, in the best way possible. Aisha's experience had changed her, but it didn't harden her heart. Instead, she became more thoughtful in her generosity. She still helped the villagers, but now she did it in ways that were more careful and considered. She involved others in her decisions, encouraging them to be part of the solution. Her approach to kindness became a lesson for the entire village. People started to think more about how they helped each other. They learned that kindness wasn't just about giving things away. It was about understanding, listening, and being there for each other in the right way. And as for Aisha, her grandmother's words, people love heroes, but what they love more than heroes is seeing the hero fall, had guided her to a deeper understanding of kindness, one that not only gives but also builds and strengthens. She now realized that she could be kind and wise at the same time, making her world a better place in her own unique way. The story of Aisha teaches us a valuable lesson about the balance between kindness and wisdom. While kindness is a noble quality, it is essential to approach helping others with thoughtfulness and caution. Acting impulsively, even with good intentions, can sometimes lead to misunderstandings or unintended consequences. Aisha's experience reminds us that true kindness involves understanding the situation, making wise decisions, and knowing when to involve others for better solutions. Additionally, the story highlights the danger of judging others hastily or allowing fear and suspicion to cloud our judgment. Trust and unity within a community can only thrive when people are willing to listen, support, and think carefully before accusing others. Finally, Aisha's resilience and her ability to forgive and grow from her experiences demonstrate the importance of inner strength and learning from challenges. Her journey reminds us that being both kind and wise can lead to stronger, more meaningful connections with others. Thank you for watching my channel. If you enjoyed this story and its valuable lesson, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring and insightful content. See you in the next video. That same night, Halima cast a spell on her son Jamal while he was asleep. Once upon a time, in a small village called Tafia, there lived a beautiful and kind lady named Nafisa. Nafisa was so beautiful that her beauty and grace caught the eyes of many men. Many men came for her hand in marriage, but she bluntly refused their advances. Her only reason for rejecting men who came for her hand in marriage was simply because she never wanted to make a mistake and end up marrying the wrong man. She was scared of being mistreated by any man she could call her husband. So for that reason, she rejected many men who didn't seem worthy to her. Nafisa was almost 27 without a husband or child. Her mother became impatient with her and she began to persuade her to accept any of the suitors and get married. Nafisa ignored her mother's advice, saying that she had not found the man she wanted to spend the rest of her life with. All her mates and friends in Tafia village were married with kids, but Nafisa was still single. This made the villagers make fun of her each time she passed by the village square. The villagers called her different names, while some called her an evil spirit. Despite all the side talk and pressure from people, Nafisa never listened or cared, and she never failed to carry herself with grace. One day, as Nafisa was going to the market and passing along the bushy paths, she was bitten by a snake on her left foot. She fell down, writhing in pain and screaming for help, but no one could hear her. She kept screaming for help. Fortunately, a very handsome man named Jamal, who was passing by the road, saw Nafisa lying on the ground. He ran immediately to help her. When he got there, he asked Nafisa what happened, and she told him she had been bitten by a snake. Jamal took pity on Nafisa, carried her immediately, and took her to the village herbalist. The village herbalist treated Nafisa, but she fell asleep during the treatment. When she woke up, she found Jamal watching over her. She noticed the gentle concern in his eyes and the way he adjusted her blanket while she slept. After she regained her strength, she thanked Jamal for saving her life, and immediately she fell in love with Jamal, and Jamal also fell in love with her. It was love at first sight. Jamal loved Nafisa so much that he decided to marry her and make her his wife. He asked for Nafisa's hand in marriage, and Nafisa didn't hesitate to accept his marriage proposal. After their successful marriage, Nafisa was so happy to be married to Jamal. Nafisa moved into Jamal's house, and they began to live as husband and wife. They were living peacefully until one day when Jamal's mother Halima visited Jamal uninvited. Jamal's mother was known for her troublesome and arrogant lifestyle, and everyone tried their best to stay away from her trouble because she was known for her powers and love for black magic. She possessed strange magical powers which she received directly from the river goddess of Tafia village, making people fear her even more. When Nafisa saw her mother-in-law, she welcomed her warmly and served her some food. Her mother-in-law ate the food, pretending to be a good woman. After she ate the food, when her son Jamal got back home, she started complaining to Jamal about Nafisa and the food she had given her to eat. She told Jamal that the food Nafisa gave her was tasteless and had no meat, and that Nafisa had added water into her food. However, Jamal, knowing who his mother was, didn't take the complaint seriously. Halima gradually began to make Nafisa's matrimonial home unbearable for her. She kept nagging at the slightest mistake, always finding fault with Nafisa and making her life difficult. Nafisa, being a good and kind woman, kept trying her best to please and satisfy her mother-in-law despite her unkindness towards her. She went as far as washing all her clothes, putting 6 different varieties of meals for her every day to suit her taste. She would clean the house to her mother-in-law's satisfaction, wash all her dirty clothes, and take care of her needs. However, Halima was never satisfied. She always had something to complain about. Nafisa gradually became a maid in her own matrimonial home, with no rest or moments of peace for her. Every morning, as soon as Jamal left home, Halima would keep sending Nafisa on different errands. Sometimes she would invent chores just to keep Nafisa busy and exhausted. Nafisa kept enduring despair just to make sure her home was at peace. But one day, Miriam opened up to her husband and told him about the sufferings his mother had put her through. Her husband Idris was very upset and unhappy. He tried to speak with his mother concerning the stress she put his wife through. He told his mother to let Miriam be and to stop treating her like that. Hajara became angry at Miriam for reporting her to her husband, her son. She swore to deal with Miriam. That same night, Hajara cast a spell on her son, Idris, while He was asleep. The spell she cast on him was to make him unresponsive to her evil deeds. No matter how she treated his wife, he was never going to react or say anything about it. When Hajara knew that she had her son under her grip, she turned Mariam into a full-time housemaid, and Mariam kept suffering while her husband kept quiet over all the mistreatment from her mother. But Mariam never knew her husband was under a spell. Mariam continued enduring the torments from her mother-in-law, and this continued for months. One day, Mariam discovered she was pregnant with her first child. She was happy that she was going to become a mother very soon. She told her husband the good news, and she begged her husband never to let his mother Hajara know about it. From her mother-in-law continued, and Mariam discovered that she has begun to get weaker and weaker as the week passed. She decided to leave her matrimonial home, telling her husband that she could be traveling to her home and that she will stay there until she gives birth. During their discussion, they never knew that Hajara was standing behind a door, listening to their conversation, and then she came to realize that her daughter-in-law was pregnant. Hajara began to plot. How to stop her daughter-in-law from leaving was to leave Hajara sneaked into her room and added some substance into Mariam's food. After Mariam ate the food, she began to feel dizzy and wouldn't leave. She slept for hours, and by the time she woke up, it was already late at night. She noticed something was added to the food she had eaten. She became upset and confronted her mother-in-law. Hajara couldn't believe that Mariam could have the guts to confront her. Hajara swore to stay with Mariam. Hajara used her strange powers to cast a second spell on her son. This time she touched a spell for her son to do whatsoever she told him to do. She started first by telling her son to stop taking care of his wife and also to stop giving her money for food. Her aim was to see Mariam starve to death. Mariam struggled to take care of herself and her unborn child single-handedly. She was able to survive by doing some manual jobs for people where they paid her some meager amount of money, which she used to buy food for herself and also to buy some baby stuff for her unborn child. It surprised Hajara how Mariam was able to survive even without the help of her husband. Hajara thought maybe the spell she cast on her son was not enough to make Mariam suffer, so she decided to cast a spell on her pregnancy. The spell was to stop Mariam's pregnancy from reaching full term. After 6 months, it was almost time for Mariam to deliver. She was excited that her baby could arrive soon. She got everything ready. 10 and 11 months passed, and there were no signs of labor. Mariam began to weep, asking God to help her deliver. But the more she waited, the more everything seemed like it was in vain. Her mother-in-law began to mock her and call her names, telling her that this is what you get for challenging me. Her husband, who was under the influence of his mother's charm, didn't even care about his wife. Mariam was left to carry this challenge alone. Hajara, who was determined to see her daughter-in-law suffer, brought another woman for her son to marry. She sent Mariam away from her matrimonial home, even with her pregnancy. When Mariam got home, she narrated the whole event to her mother. Her mother was so emotional that her daughter had gone through all this in the hands of her mother-in-law. She welcomed her daughter and took care of Mariam. She was excited that her daughter made it out alive. Mariam kept struggling with her pregnancy. At the 18th month of her pregnancy, she fell sick. Her mother began to grow concerned for her daughter and her pregnancy. She took her to a herbalist, and after the herbalist examined her, he told Mariam's mother that her daughter's pregnancy was under a spell. With the spell on her, she could never give birth, as she might probably die with the pregnancy. Her mother was terrified and asked the herbalist what she could do to undo the